Hey friends. So I have started a new audiobook. This one is kind of a near and dear to my heart one, I suppose, because it's written by the priest who baptized me, who married my parents, who married me and my wife, and has been a lifelong family friend. I mean, he's been a friend of my parents since before I was born. And the audiobook is read aloud by my father. Obviously, read aloud. You read audiobooks aloud. Wouldn't be any fun if they just sat in the recording studio and read the book, would it? But it's starting off with some really interesting thoughts, some really kind of it's called The Scandal of God, and it's all about, I'm just starting, but my sense is that the subject matter is sort of a take on what fundamentalism does to our thinking in whatever domain it pops up. Whether it's the religious domain, which obviously we see plenty of that, but it can also pop up in the scientific community. It can be fundamentalism is more about the way we hold our beliefs than it is about those beliefs themselves. And it's about what holding or not holding beliefs means, rather than about what is the content of our beliefs. What is it that we believe, really and truly, and probing into that. There's something inherently scientific about continuing to investigate meaning in whatever domain, and scientists, we will explore that in the kind of exterior world, the experimenting with things and devices and the sense data that we, light, sound, everything we can record and perceive can be investigated by science. But this is a point that Ken Wilber has made, for years and years and years, decades now. Scientific method can also be applied to the interior domain, and that's where we get spiritual sciences. That's why someone like Sadhguru calls yoga a science. He calls it a scientific discipline. It is the science of consciousness and the science of perceived embodiment. What is our body really? How do we maintain our body? How do we use our body? What is the instrument of our body capable of? Coming from the perspective that that's not sort of like necessarily the Western scientific perspective. What energy is available to us? What energies are we channeling? How do we become a better antenna for the kinds of energies that we want to receive more of? This is something that can be approached very scientifically. And I think what the Scandal of God is probing into so far, and I've really only scratched the surface. I've probably listened to the first 45 minutes or so. But it's clear that this is about the perceived conflicts between science and religion not really being conflicts at all between science and religion, but rather a conflict, but the conflict being between kind of fundamentalists of various camps being unwilling to communicate, being unwilling to evaluate their own thoughts and belief systems. Simple as that. There's a beautiful quote by, I think, Christopher Hitchens, where this is somewhere at the beginning of chapter 1, maybe, where he basically said, I'm going to paraphrase this, but he says something like being an unbeliever, and an unbeliever for Hitchens is somebody who's like an open-minded, kind of like somebody who's not a fundamentalist. He says being an unbeliever is not simply about being open-minded, it's about rejecting the totalitarian principle in practice as well as in mind. And that phrase really activated something for me, because it kind of sent up a flare of it was like I suddenly saw a new glimpse of what fundamentalism is. And I was able to identify something in the phrase, the totalitarian principle. I was able to identify something or put words to something that I see. I see it in writing, when in the various things I read. I also encounter it from time to time in conversation. The best I can describe it, if I were going to say the totalitarian principle, it's like a sense that our beliefs are real, for one thing, an unquestioning sense of that our beliefs represent reality. And then as a secondary step, a kind of almost generally unspoken, although sometimes very explicitly spoken, but usually unspoken, feeling that those beliefs ought to be the way the world is. So it's the sense that what we believe about the world is right, and that it represents reality, and that and other beliefs or perspectives on an issue are erroneous, and then by extension, that almost sort of by fiat of my belief, because of its inherent rightness, I sort of have the right to impose this on the world. Now, obviously, there's a limited number of dictators in the world, right? There's a limited number of countries in the world. How many dictators can there be? A couple hundred? I mean, through history, we've obviously got, a vast slew of them. But when we're talking about the totalitarian principle, we're not necessarily talking about totalitarian rulers or totalitarian systems. We're talking about a totalitarian way of thinking, and that's what I found so elegantly encapsulated in this quote, is that we don't have to. Nobody's running around America talking about we need to have a totalitarian regime. Nobody's saying that. Look at we love to say that other people are saying that. We love to, from either side or all sides, point at the other side and say they want to impose a totalitarian regime, but nobody is saying I want to impose a totalitarian regime. They don't say there are countries where they do say that, or at least they say something pretty close to that, and it's not, and doesn't doesn't ruffle too many feathers. But that's not what's going on in our country. And yet, that certainly does not mean that we are free of the totalitarian principle. And this is what I found so kind of inspiring and revelatory about just that quote, which was really only, I mean, kind of touched on in the first part of the chapter that I listened to. But this notion that we can be in a conversation and encounter the totalitarian principle because someone's not willing to evaluate their own thoughts. They're not willing to reevaluate their own thoughts. They're not willing to hold reality, to hold all beliefs with a kind of gentle touch, a sense that what we're holding is a lens through which we're seeing reality, a lens through which we're seeing the world, and I think, it's funny because it illuminated for me. I was like, there's some conversations I've had in the last, I don't know, couple of weeks, months, where I sort of recall feeling a sense of, wait, something, how are we gonna make movement if we can't start from this place of reevaluation? It's interesting because I as I was reading Kendi's book, one of the things that stood out to me is that he relentlessly reevaluates his own perspective. I mean, the story of that book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, is, I would say, almost most prominently a story of Kendi's own evolution, where he's revealing perspectives that he has held and then showing us the turning points and showing us the ambiguities and the contradictions and the experiences that came along with certain viewpoints, and then mapping his own evolution. And that was the primary thing that stood out to me, was this willingness to always look again. And it's no surprise. I mean, Kendi quotes one of his greatest mentors as saying, she gave a lecture on how we can never know the ultimate, how we can never know the ultimate truth, or something like that. We can never know the ultimate way. And then he asked, so what are we supposed to do? And she said, we're supposed to try to discover the truth. We're supposed to try to seek, to find, and embody the truth. And that's certainly the journey that he maps. And I think in this book, The Scandal of God, where I haven't read it, but where this seems to be going, and the sort of outgoing premise seems to be that a continual reevaluation and a continual, awareness of how we hold our beliefs versus what are those beliefs. If the most important thing to debate and consider is what the beliefs are, there's inherent competition, is inevitable, and in many ways terminal. It's zero sum. Because if there is actually like the right basket of beliefs, if we can actually attain the right constellation of thoughts to then be the most enlightened or empowered or whatever, then that means that our job is to sift through and debunk and delegitimize all the wrong beliefs, so that we can arrive at the right ones, or so that we can prove that the ones that we hold are the right ones. But what if that's not it at all? What if that's the opposite of seeking truth? What if seeking truth has got to be, how do I hold this? What is it? Sure, that's important, but how am I holding it? How do I bring it into dialogue? What happens to it? What happens to me? when I bring it into dialogue. You know, our values and who we are and what we believe ultimately manifest through action and dialogue and communication much more than they do in our conscious thought. We think we know what we believe, but we really find out what we believe in those relational experiences. So I'm at the beginning of this one, but it's already inspiring, and I'm looking forward to hearing my dad read the rest of it. I'll keep you posted. It's not out yet. It's going to be released one of these days. You'll be able to all listen to it. Thanks for watching, folks. Appreciate you. Have a wonderful day. See you soon.